Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to our AI-powered automation webinar. Before I pass it over to our speaker, I want to take a quick minute to go over what we do here at Fierce Software. Fierce Software is a small, women-owned, value-added reseller. We specialize in enterprise open source software, market-leading DevOps capabilities, and secure data platforms for our public sector customers. Our unique reseller perspective helps us understand your goals and technology challenges, allowing us to offer solutions from our extensive portfolio rather than just a single vendor approach. We set ourselves apart in the reseller market by consistently delivering on our core capabilities. We are an innovation broker to leading technologies, getting our customers access to the smartest people and the best technology available. We are a licensed manager, streamlining customer fulfillment and reducing administrative burdens. Our focus is on customer success, ensuring technical support through vendor-trained and certified professional services. We also provide customer enablement by delivering workshops, webinars, and hands-on events to educate our customers about the new features and enhance their team's capabilities. At Fierce Software, we're dedicated to supporting your Red Hat training journey, and we can offer discounted training rates off of MSRP. After this session, we'd be happy to provide you a quote tailored to your needs or any extra information. If you have any questions at any point, go ahead and leave them in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on them, and we'll also answer some questions at the end. I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic now, and you can go ahead and get things started, Rob.
Thanks so much, Jody. And thank you for having me here. My name is Rob Locke. I'm a senior solution architect with the Red Hat training and certification team. I've been with Red Hat now for a little over 20 years. I'm an old instructor. I used to make the curriculum. I was a lab architect. I even made some of those dreaded exams that you all love so much. These days, I like sort of trying to steer the ship a little bit in terms of what your learning journeys might be and getting a chance to play with more of our technologies. Uh, Today's webinar is about AI-powered automation. Last month, we released a new version of our Ansible Automation Platform, version 2.5, and we're really instilling more and more intelligence into the platform itself to try to help all of us bridge those skill gaps that we have within IT. So let's start off a little bit with the problem statement. We'll take a look at how Ansible is answering that statement and then dive in a little bit closer on what AAP 2.5 represents for all of us. So, all of us in the enterprise need to be able to unlock an automation advantage. I don't know about you, but I sort of got my teeth going on writing old seashell scripts back in the day on various Unix platforms. Uh, Moved on to Bash, of course, with Linux, but now I need something that really provides me with a better solution for automation. The amount of code that I had to build into those shell scripts so that I could make them, for example, idempotent as we go to execute them is something that needs to be built into the tooling that we're using. Reality is we all fill a different role, right, within our organizations. We might be one of the developers, we might be in IT operations, responsible for security, maybe a line of business, or maybe we play with those network devices to keep everything communicating. The reality is there's a growing number of use cases, and all of these individual groups need a path to better communication. I think the old adage is, of course, we all want to break down the silos. I'm not so sure I want to break down the silos. I sort of like the silos. A lot of us built them and put them into our organizations for good reason. But what we need are some accessible doorways between those silos, allowing all of us perhaps to operate from a common framework, a common language within those environments. So, why Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform? What is it about AAP that's going to help us to facilitate those communication paths? Well, The reality is, Ansible does more because it is more. It is so much more than those little shell scripts or PowerShell scripts and things that we would all build as a form of automation. It is has more open source innovation than anything else. So the building blocks are constantly evolving and constantly growing. We've got 55,000 plus GitHub stars, more than 3,500 active open source contributors, making Ansible the number one IT automation community in the world. It's more trusted. Red Hat has stepped behind Ansible and is providing that enterprise level support so that you can build a more secure life cycle to that automation, those automation units that you're building. And you've got us standing behind and testing and correcting those bug fixes and stuff. There's also a lot of security elements we'll talk about a little bit later on. The reality is Ansible is more capable because it is more. It's able to provide automation across all of these disparate elements, whether it's infrastructure or network that I'm trying to manage, whether it's devices out at the edge or my hybrid cloud. But it's being able to manage the configuration, manage the security, be able to do all of this in an automated way. And then two areas where we're applying AI or intelligence is in generative AI and event-driven Ansible, something we're going to spend a lot of time on here in this talk. It's more flexible because we can be deploying this solution regardless of what type of data center or cloud or edge environments you happen to be working with. It's more collaborative. I mentioned breaking down the silos, but really what I want is better communication paths. Even as I talk to customers that are beginning their automation journeys, they're already starting to define job roles within automation. Certain people will be responsible for creating the playbooks, the roles, and the modules. Others will be responsible for architecting the entire environment. Others will administer and operate that environment. And so, depending upon the size of your organization, you might be the person that does all four of these, or you might have four different groups of people doing these pieces. It is the more established solution, looking at some of these numbers of how many partners, how many certified content collections, how many integrators and resellers, and how many customers are purchasing and operating with Ansible Automation Platform, not to mention all of those folks out in the open source ecosystem that are simply implementing it on their own. And of course, to keep the folks above you happy, we got some numbers. One of those standard white papers was produced a little earlier this year and identified a lot of the benefits that you're going to be able to get by beginning that automation journey. So, what exactly is Red Hat AAP? Well, it's a platform for the whole team. We were talking earlier about those four separate places. Well, I've narrowed it down to three here. Those that are creating the content, those that are designing the environment, and those responsible for operations. And so, what are the things that we're doing in 2.5 to make this better? Well, remember, it's an integrated solution for the whole enterprise. And so, whether you're creating, whether you're managing, whether you're looking to scale this solution, all of the pieces are here. And we're going to go through several of those that you see highlighted on this slide. But before I do that, I want to talk for a few moments about how you can start to get involved with Ansible. You have several different hosting options. You can decide to implement AAP and host it yourself on either Red Hat Enterprise Linux, where you're self-managing, self-deploying, and building it either on-premise in your own data center or perhaps on RHEL instances that are in the cloud. Or we have a way that AAP can be deployed within Red Hat OpenShift, our cloud native solution for containers. But maybe you're looking for more of a managed environment. And so, as we've built this for OpenShift, we've also built it to be able to be available in cloud marketplaces like Google Cloud and AWS, where you can just pick it from that marketplace and deploy your AAP server side elements. It's deployed by you, it's managed by you, but we even went a step further with Microsoft Azure, and in that marketplace, you can deploy it, but then actually have us at Red Hat manage it for you. And so when there are updates, those kinds of things, the upgrade paths and such, well, that's Red Hat will take care of that for you within Azure. So we've got an idea as to the scope, what we're looking for. We're looking for an automation solution that can scale with us and that we can deploy quickly. So, what is it about this latest version 2.5 that's making a change to how we might begin that journey? We need to be able to unlock that automation advantage. And so we are going to accelerate the automation adoption and allow you to do that at scale. We'll go through several elements that provide support for that. We're going to give you those generative AI capabilities to be able to empower your automation engineers to be able to develop that automation content that much faster. And then finally, we're going to take a look at how to orchestrate that across the enterprise and introduce some intelligence there with something that we call event-driven Ansible or event-driven automation. Basically, automating the automation. So let's take a look at the first one here, accelerating automation adoption at scale. Four pieces that we're introducing here in 2.5. One is a new unified UI. I'll go through why that matters. But we're also speeding the installation process by containerizing. You saw that we had a way to have AAP deployed in OpenShift. Well, we can also deploy it as containers directly on RHEL using something like Podman to go ahead and manage those containers. That should streamline and speed your ability to install. We've introduced into the unified UI a new guided experience, these ideas of quick starts, allowing you to identify those most common platforms and tasks to be able to do those quickly and easily. Basically, getting your new users up to speed faster. We also have some new collections for managing AAP itself. We'll take a look at those at the end. So let's start with the unified UI. What is it? Well, in essence, it's allowing us to have centralized control for something that historically were three distinct elements of the platform. We started with, you may recall way back when, Ansible Tower. Well, as we started to segregate the control plane from the execution plane in Ansible Automation Platform 2, we introduced Ansible Controller to replace that piece of Ansible Tower, what most of us looked at Tower as being. Automation Controller is the orchestration piece here for going out and running that automation. But we wanted to apply some intelligence to that. So a couple of versions ago, we introduced the event-driven controller, which can allow us to define some rule books about when we want to be able to automatically respond to an event in the environment and perform some automation. We'll take a look at what those rule books look like towards the end of this. And then the third big piece was the private automation hub. We've developed all of this automation. Where do we store it? How do we share it amongst the different groups? Part of that, creating the doorways in the silos. Traditionally, this were three completely separate elements that you were deploying in your environment. Each one has its own set of credentials and authorization. Each had its own UI. And so to be able to configure the elements, you are going through three different pieces. Well, now you're going to go ahead and deploy the various elements. We have a unified UI, a single sort of creds and authorization system to be able to go out and manage the configurations of what each of these three pieces of AAP do. So this new unified UI looks a little bit like this here on the right. It's a new interface that we've introduced, and it brings together managing those three distinct pieces. But the piece that I'm most interested in with this unified UI is that we are beginning to build in more and more analytics. The understanding of, how our system is operating and what sort of benefit it is providing for us. And so there's a built-in automation calculator that can do some of that return on investment reporting for you. Whereas before we used to have to do all that by hand, right? Well, I can have that built into the system for you. And this is really laying the groundwork for lots of new things for us to do with 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, or, if we ever pull the plug and start calling it 3.0, whatever comes in the next versions. Now, the second piece that we were looking to do after the unified UI with 2.5 was to provide containerized platform installation. This makes it very easy for you and I to establish some initial proof of concept deployments. So I can have a single VM running RHEL, and I can throw the various components, automation controller, EDA controller, private automation hub. I can put each of those containers onto a single VM, manage it with Podman, but allows me to do that sort of small initial deployment as I'm beginning to experiment with AAP. That can then grow to a multi-VM enterprise topology where you can start building in that service redundancy. And managing through containers is really the future of us managing services. The third piece to speed adoption were the Ansible quick starts. As I mentioned, these are basically step-by-step guides that are taking you through some of the most common tasks. You can actually extend this, build some of your own content into it, but the goal, of course, is to allow your operators, your administrators, to be able to utilize this platform faster. And then the last piece is for the architects that are responsible for designing your AAP infrastructure and being able to put it out there. Well, shouldn't we automate the deployment? And so we've got new collections for managing AAP and being able to go out there and work with them. You see two new ones, Ansible Hub and Ansible Platform. We've also updated the one for EDA and regular controller. We've got some new validated collections that are also available from the upstream community. All right, so we're speeding the adoption. The second thing we're doing in 2.5 is better empowering the automation engineers. And so these are the folks that are developing your automation content. They're the ones going in and writing their playbooks, creating them, testing them, and then passing them up for deployment. There were really three basic areas we needed to improve. One is from the command line, we need to refresh and update the tooling that's available there to allow you to work a little more efficiently. I'm sure you've seen some of the press around Ansible Lightspeed and our cooperative work with Watson X and being able to uh, automatically generate Ansible playbooks with a more natural language definition. And so we'll take a closer look at that one in particular in a few more slides. But the last piece is really that silo, separation and creating the doorways between them. We need a platform on which to build the community, to build the communication path. And so Backstage is the upstream project. We offer it as a product called Red Hat Developer Hub. And that gives you a portal-like experience to be able to work across your teams. And so we've introduced some new Ansible plugins to Developer Hub to make it easier for you to coordinate those efforts. I mentioned the development tools, some of the ones that are here, but from the command line, really some of the big ones to pay attention to are Ansible Creator is relatively new. That allows me to scaffold the projects and the content. I remember a long time ago me running Ansible Galaxy to go ahead and create the role sort of directory structure and stuff. Ansible Creator is sort of modernizing that and providing support for that. We've got better integration to VS Code that most folks are using to actually write their stuff. And VS Code, probably a good one to do because that's where Ansible Lightspeed has the predefined plugin for you. We'll probably work on others, but for right now, VS Code is where we'll do that. From testing perspective, we got some new molecule plugins. If that's a tool you use for testing, doing a test run. But then on the deployment side, remember, part of the goal here is that we need a trusted software supply chain. So as you are building automation, you need to be able to trust where that's coming from across your communities. And so the ability to sign that content as part of the deployment can help to ensure the integrity. We've made some upgrades to Red Hat Ansible Lightspeed with the IBM Watson X Code Assistant, where it has a new guided interface that you can step through. You can actually go through and refine the prompts as it's doing to then ultimately give you full playbook generation. There is a link in the slide deck that you'll be able to get from Jody afterwards, where you can take a look at a free 90-day trial of Red Hat Ansible Lightspeed with IBM Watson X Code Assistant. We'll take a little closer look at this a little bit later on. As I mentioned, we've got new Ansible plugins for the community part of this, which is Red Hat Developer Hub, so that you can build your own community of practice about how to create the best automation. The third place we wanted to help improve things was orchestrating across the enterprise. And this is the one where we're looking to do this at scale. And to me, really the key one is the one there in the middle, turn intelligence into action. Event-driven Ansible allows you to tie in your various observability tools that are generating these events, these alerts, and you can turn that into more actionable events and ultimately automated workflows. And so when you get that alert that the network connection to one of your data centers has gone down, you can take the automation automatically to redirect that content somewhere else. I will tell you one of the things that we've done with 2.5 is we have streamlined event routing within it. So one of the challenges we had with earlier versions of EDA is there was a bit of a scalability problem. You see there on the left, without simplified event routing, is that each of the alerting configurations would send alerts to distinct ports on the EDA controller. And so in high volume, high stress situations for your events, this was frankly falling over. Um, Over on the right, with simplified event routing, we've introduced this concept known as an event stream, which cleans up that routing process. And so this makes its scale significantly larger for us. Event streams are an easy way for you to connect your sources to rule books um, and direct those various events. We'll see some more about what rule books look like and some examples of that a little bit later on. Some of the things that you might want to do with just event-driven Ansible in general. Let's say you're a developer. I'd like to reload and refresh my web servers when I commit new code to my repo. Let's say your repo's up in GitHub. GitHub generates an event, a hook, and we can pull that and automatically launch and tell the web servers to reload. As a ServiceNow administrator there on the right, I want to be able to execute Ansible automation that will automatically fail over my data center if the number of support tickets that alert me to network failure goes above my threshold. So, again, the same kind of thing, but that's a plugin directly to ServiceNow, where ServiceNow is generating the event based on the volume of tickets. So, EDA, substantially better scaling here in 2.5. We've also integrated credential management for securing access to those event sources. And it's now a fully integrated part thanks to the new unified UI. The integrations that we have, the ones that were established earlier there on the left, the new ones that we've introduced with 2.5, like the ServiceNow example that we just talked about. And then we've got some additional ones coming soon. So these are all the different observability platforms that you may have implemented in your enterprise already, and being able to take those events, those observations, and bring them in to an automation pipeline. All right. So we've given you sort of an overview of what 2.5 has introduced uniquely to the AAP ecosystem. So how do you go about getting started with AAP 2.5? Well, first off, we talked about deployment a little bit earlier on and some of the managed platforms that are available to us. But let's say you're looking to self-install and do it. Well, traditionally, we've had a set of RPMs, the Red Hat Package Manager or RPM Package Manager, depending upon who you talk to. But that's traditionally how we deploy software on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux system. We still offer RPMs with 2.5, but we are announcing here with 2.5 that we are deprecating the distribution in RPMs. We don't know when we're actually going to stop, but we're warning you that at some point we will stop delivering RPMs in a future version of AAP. 2.5, for its lifespan, will always have RPMs, but a future version may not have it. The reason for that is we are truly shifting to this idea of containerized installations. It is much easier for us to deploy and, frankly, ultimately manage containers. In fact, I'd even suggest you take a brief look at some of the stuff that's starting to float out there about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10, all right, and the idea of image mode. This really is us containerizing RHEL to be out there and really changing the installation process as an option in RHEL 10. But this is all the direction that this is going, making it more similar to how you and I deploy in the data center as to how we might deploy it in a cloud. So the containers, rapid scaling, that sort of stuff, that's really where things are. And that's where we want to keep moving forward. Then we wrap those containers into an OpenShift operator to make it very easy to have an automated lifecycle management within OpenShift if you're using OpenShift to ultimately manage your containers. So those are the three basic installation methods available to you with 2.5. So how do I get there and start accessing some of those new features? Well, you can do a fresh on-premise install. You could take a look at one of the cloud deployments with the marketplaces that we talked about earlier. Or if you happen to be in the situation where you're looking to upgrade from 2.4, all right, how can I go about upgrading there? For example, let's say I've got my infrastructure on 2.4, but EDA is having some scalability issues for me. Gee, I'd really love to have the 2.5 EDA, all right, but I'm not quite ready to move controller and private automation hub up to 2.5, admittedly to get the new unified UI and all that kind of fun stuff too. But, maybe I need a little more time before I make that migration, but I need to start looking at EDA 2.5. Well, as we mentioned down here at the bottom, you can take advantage of the new EDA capabilities today. You can link a new EDA 2.5 deployment with your existing 2.4 environment. We're providing a bridge for you to be able to get to that newer EDA faster. All right. So once we have it deployed, well, what are the next steps? Well, your automation team, the basic role is, right, we create automation, we manage our enterprise, and we need to scale this. So let's take a look at the process of creating automation. First off, there are lots of things that you would have available within a community of practice. You have Ansible content collections. There are the certified collections that come from Red Hat. There are open source collections available upstream. We have lots of development tools. We'll take a look at a couple here in a moment. And we have the plugins for Red Hat Developer Hub if you're establishing your community over there. We even have some development workspaces, sort of a opinionated, integrated dev environment for you that'll have the development tools, the VS Code, Ansible Lightspeed, all built into that workspace. And we can use Ansible Lightspeed to collaborate and be able to build that content that much faster. So, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, the Ansible plugins for the Red Hat Developer Hub, or Backstage is the upstream project. But we have the plugins provide a specific Ansible focused front end for you to be able to build and add content to Developer Hub. You get push button Ansible playbook and collection creation. There are also some best practices and things built into Developer Hub for you with some suggestions about how you may want to construct those elements. The development tools we saw a little bit earlier on, this slide of the different groups and elements, but let's go in and take a little closer look at some of this. So, Ansible Core is the main building block for Ansible. It is the thing that ultimately runs our playbooks, as shown here as an example over on the right. This particular playbook, as you can see, is geared towards, if I just look at the two names highlighted in yellow for me, turns off a specified VM guest. And based upon some of the wording down below, this looks like it's a VMware VM guest that we are shutting down. And how do I do that? Well, I log into vCenter, that host name with that username and that password. A playbook, like we see there on the right, is made up of plays, modules, and plugins. Ultimately, plays are the process we're going through. Modules is the code that can actually perform the action, and then plugins modify the behavior of how we may want to perform this. So as a brief example here, this is a playbook with a single play. The play is that name up above, install and start Apache. It is made up of 3 tasks indented here in a basic YAML syntax. The first task is ensuring that the HTTPD package is installed. Well, that's the name of the package for Apache Web Services in RHEL. We then want to create the content that's going to be displayed, create the index.html file, and then lastly, we want to start that service if needed. Now, the interesting thing is ensure that the package is installed. Start if needed essentially refers to the idea that all of these Ansible tasks, all these actions, calling these modules is idempotent. It's going to perform the action if needed, if it's not already done. You see, everything I'm coding in here is about end state. How do I want my environment to be? What should it look like at the end? It should look like it has Apache installed and started, and that it's serving up the content it's supposed to serve. Well, if somehow this got broken in the middle or somebody went in and stopped the service, well, if I rerun this playbook, the package is already installed, the content's already there. I just need to start it. So I only have to make one change to the system. I'm not reinstalling the package. I'm not recreating that content unless it was changed and it needs to be updated. Now, the modules are the Ansible.builtin.package, the Ansible.builtin.template, Ansible.builtin.service. Well, the package built in is for managing packages. The template built in is for working with files. And the service, obviously, is working with services. So those are my modules. The plugins are become colon true. In order to be allowed to install a package, in order to be allowed to copy this file in or start the service, I need to have some privilege. And so become colon true says, yes, become the super user on this system. Now, one of the things that we can build into these structures are some roles. Roles allow you to group tasks coupled with some variables to create this in a reusable structure. And this allows us to write the role once, and then we can reuse it for multiple use cases, similar challenges. How do we combine modules that we've written, roles that we've written, playbooks that we've written? We can accumulate all of that stuff together into what's called a content collection. Brings all of those elements together into a sort of portable package. And then we can publish those content collections in our private automation hub. But we'll see the deployment part a little bit later on. Oh, never mind. Right here. Automation Hub, all right, console.redhat.com basically shows all of the trusted, validated content coming from Red Hat. So this is our certified set of collections. So you can go to console.redhat.com and find collections that have already been built. You can configure your AAP platform to simply look to the central Red Hat Automation Hub, or you can have it look to a private automation hub. With a private automation hub, it can be pulling our custom enterprise content there on the left, the general certified collection known as Automation Hub, and even the upstream open source collections found in Ansible Galaxy. So we can be pulling from all of those sources, and you can identify which pieces from each. You don't have to take the wholesale console.redhat.com content collections, all of them. You can cherry pick which ones you're authorizing for use within your environment. One of the beauties of Private Automation Hub. Now, to develop, test, and run this content, we are now in AAP2 in the execution plane doing this with what we term execution environments. It's a containerized sort of delivery mechanism. One of the challenges with earlier Ansible or non-containerized Ansible is that you might have some dependency challenges. If you're wanting to run a playbook that runs across a myriad of versions of Linux systems, well, what version of Python that the module was written in exists on that Linux system? What version of various libraries that we might be relying on exist on that system? The beauty of the execution environment is that it brings all of those dependencies needed by that playbook into a single place and runs it inside that container. So my dependency problems that we had in the early days of Ansible go away. Ansible Navigator is that updated front end tool for you and I to be running these things in an execution environment. Ansible Creator, I mentioned earlier, was something that is being used to allow us to really initialize the projects a little more consistently and a little better. So you see there the Ansible Playbook project and Ansible Collection project. Depending on when you want to create your own collection, you want to create your own project, all of that built into a single front end tool. Now, let's talk Ansible Lightspeed, which was the third thing there on Ansible Creator. So, as you're looking to create your content, we're assuming you're going to use an integrated development environment like VS Code. And so we have Ansible extensions that can be pulled into there. On top of that, we have an Ansible Lightspeed plugin for VS Code that can help you to be prompted and offer suggestions. But how does Ansible Lightspeed know what's a good set of, recommendations? What does it mean when you type in a certain phrase and want it to generate a playbook or a task? Well, IBM Watson X Code Assistant has been trained and has data sets in it that basically identify Ansible content. So it's not like the big scale chat GPT that sounds like my grandmother. All right. It's more like something that just understands Ansible, knows how to use a language, a spoken language, but then translate that just into Ansible. And so it's not the full scale, everything from the internet sort of large language model that it's working with. It's a curated, smaller language model. All right. The beauty of generative AI is that it can help you to create initially that content. It also will, as you go to adopt this stuff, actually teach you a bit about what sort of lines up. As you're asking it to do something, here's what it's suggesting. And so you're learning about those modules. There's lots of explanations and things. But there's also some maintenance stuff that's available as part of this. So to create, all right, um, the Granite Foundation model trained on Ansible data sets is what we've infused in here. If you're using this, be aware that your data is isolated. It's in its own IBM Cloud instance, so anything you're doing within Ansible or with Lightspeed is not shared with others. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. All right. It can guide us through the process of generating that playbook over on the left. So the guided chat, you enter some words about what it is you're trying to accomplish. It can then refine the prompts of, well, what do you think the basic steps are going to be to accomplish what you're looking to have happen? And it can be a bit of a back and forth to ultimately generate the playbook here on the left. So again, do all of this through Content Creator. And so here it is sort of streamlined. I want to deploy a stack on RHEL, a LAMP stack on RHEL. And so it says, okay, you need to install Apache, MySQL, PHP, start Apache, start MySQL. Well, I want to insert a step 4, configure Apache to run on a non-standard port. And so now it's gone out and it's generated that content for me, including reconfiguring Apache to work on that non-standard port. With this, you actually also now have the ability to further train the model yourself. And so you can do some of that tuning if you played it all with Granite. You know about how to upload your own data sets and content into that. This is done in the same fashion. Content source matching can let you know where this is coming from, so that we know where the training content and why it gave me that recommendation. Is it something that came from IBM and Red Hat having done the initial training, or is it something coming from the training that I've uploaded and incorporated into this environment? So each generated code suggestion will provide you with a training source, an author, and a license. For adoption, again, this is sort of helping me with some best practices, recommendations as to what to put in there, and such as I'm going through. But the one I'm most interested in, I'll be honest with you, is the Ansible CodeBot. The CodeBot integrates natively with a Git repo. And so it can go up to that Git repo and evaluate your playbooks and say, here's a pull request that's going to make your playbook follow better practices. So it makes it easier for our teams to perhaps review, test, and apply improvements to our code base. All right, so Ansible Lightspeed, generative AI, the Ansible way, where we are tying together a VS Code Ansible extension with the Ansible Lightspeed service, and ultimately IBM Cloud with Watson X Code Assistant. So there is a link here on the slide deck that will take you through the process of getting started with this, if that's something you want to start playing with. You can do it as a SaaS offering where you're going to IBM Cloud for Watson X. One of the things we've introduced in 2.5 is an ability to obtain an IBM Cloud Pack for data and be able to install all of that model and such locally within your data center, so that as you're training it or you don't have access to the cloud from your infrastructure, you can continue to work with this stuff in isolation. All right, so that's create. We've got the generative AI to help us create that faster. We've got deployment things. They're helping us get it out there faster. Let's take a look at manage. Again, content creation, we're developing, running, and we build with our development tools, our content collections and execution environments. We publish that to the private automation hub. So this is our handover to operations. Well, how do they go about running this content? Well, that's where automation controller comes in. As I said, it's sort of the central organizer, the one that orchestrates that execution. And it does all of it through what's termed a job template. And so the projects, all right, with the content collections and the execution environments are coming out of Private Automation Hub. We tie in some credentials, all right, some inventories, and we're able to go out and execute that automation content. Your identity and access management can be coming from lots of different, excuse me, from lots of different places, but our workflow, dashboards, audit and logging, all of that being tied in to that automation controller. Now, event-driven Ansible has the automation controller, but we have these observations, this sort of integration piece here, where these various observability platforms are generating these events that we can be pulling. We can then, in event-driven Ansible, evaluate those events and then define a response, which is our defined automation, the job template that perhaps we want to go ahead and execute. So, how does EDA make those decisions? Well, it looks a lot like a playbook, but we call it a rule book. The rule book is made up of sources and rules. Sources are the observability platforms where we're getting this information from. And then the rules are, hey, as we look at that event, we evaluate it, and here are the actions we want to take. So, a rule book, sources, conditions, and actions. Your source, all right, identifies where we're getting this information from. In this case, we have an alert manager receiving alerts in on port 5050. All right. We're going to filter the content coming in, looking just for those things in the JSON that we're receiving. We're looking for the key alert. And then the rule itself is think of it as a bunch of if then else kind of conditions. So if the alert name says SE Linux disabled, well, then what are we going to do? We're going to apply a baseline to the organization, run the job template, which will go out there and ultimately, I assume, turn SE Linux back on. So, how do we scale this? Well, we've got the automation controller, the control plane, but as our enterprises get larger and larger, the execution plane, the execution environment that's running that automation content needs to be able to distribute and be closer to the things that we're automating. And so that's where automation mesh comes in to allow us to support execution environments across larger enterprises in a fault tolerant way. So, we've given you ideas to some of the things that 2.5 is doing to change the landscape a bit for AAP. What are the proverbial next steps for us? Well, I have to admit, I am from training and certification, so I would be remiss if I did not suggest you to take some of our courses. And so here you see the entire automation learning portfolio that we have. We have foundational automation engineer elements there on the left. We have a free technical overview that any of you can go and watch. You can just go to redhat.com, search for DO007, and you can go ahead and watch those videos online to get some more exposure to how Ansible is put together. We then have three courses, and the distinction between those three courses there on the left is what are we trying to automate? You know, all three are teaching the basics of creating playbooks, creating plays, using modules, beginning to define roles for reusable content, doing all of that. But for the first course, Red Hat Enterprise Linux Automation with Ansible, well, the use case there is you're writing those playbooks to automate RHEL boxes. Well, VMs technically, but it's the RHEL. The second one there, network automation with Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform, same exact content about playbooks, plays, modules, and so on, but instead of automating Linux boxes, you're automating network devices. And the last one, care to take a guess? Yeah, I'm automating Windows machines. So again, all three of those, same content. I don't particularly recommend that you take all three. What I recommend is that you take whichever one more closely aligns with what you might want to automate. And then you might glance at the other two if you have something like a Red Hat Learning subscription. Now, over on the right-hand side, the Enterprise Automation Engineer identifies three advanced courses, two normal length courses and one shorty. DO 374, Developing Advanced Automation with Red Hat AAP. That one is focused on some of the best practices for wanting to implement infrastructure as code. And so while you were learning the foundational stuff there on the left, this one is how you would want to implement this in an enterprise. The next two, 274 and 467. 274 is a short course. It's only a couple of days in length, but it goes through and shows you the basics of setting up EDA specifically, how to write your own rule books, how you might integrate that with the observability platforms in your infrastructure. And then the last one, 467, is a normal week-long course. And this one is identifying how to set up things like automation mesh to scale that execution plane, but focuses more on um, identifying things like the role-based access controls and how to manage the three basic elements of the controller, the private automation hub within those environments. We do have sort of an accelerated 2 week course, an automation boot camp there, DO710 as another option for you. I will tell you, students that attend our classes tend to be pretty happy. They are definitely learning skills to be able to go out and implement our products in a stronger fashion. These are just some of the comments we've collected over the last few years. But really, it's the numbers. All right, 96% are better prepared to maximize the value of their Red Hat products. 93% agree that their projects are more likely to succeed, and 93% are more likely to explore other Red Hat technologies. Ultimately, training improves your efficiency, expands your possibilities, and shortens your time to value. So, Rob, where should I perhaps start? Well, we actually have online skills assessments that can tell you whether or not you're ready to take RH294, the Red Hat Enterprise Linux Automation with Ansible. Or if perhaps you need some foundational Red Hat Enterprise Linux understanding before taking that course. And so these skills assessments are there. There's a link down at the bottom to click on, or if you've got your phone handy, there's the QR code that will go off and take you to those skills assessments, not only for the Ansible ones, but also for any of our other courses and products. So I'll leave that up for a little bit. Jody, did we have any questions?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for joining us. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the main chat, so please feel free to
Okay.
leave them right now if you have anything you want to get answered. While this QR code is up, I'll go ahead and take a minute. We'll be sending out an email within the next 24 hours that will have the video recording of this session. And like I mentioned earlier, at Fierce Software, we're dedicated to supporting your Red Hat training journey. We offer discounted training rates off MSRP, and we'd be happy to provide you a tailored quote to your needs. Our contact information is on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Bye, folks.